Hello everyone, welcome to my automated solar chicken coop setup, which is going to include a door that opens and closes based upon the sunlight outside, and the light is just a light so I can see inside the coop at night. The reasons why I'm doing this is one, because I can, two, it's more fun if I do it, three, it's cheaper if I do it, and four, there's no power out there except for solar power and a battery, so it's going to have to be done with solar because I'm not going to bring an electrical cord out there. And the reasons why I am using it based upon the sunlight outside is because obviously chickens don't understand clocks. They understand it's dark, it's light, and hopefully they'll shoo themselves in at a certain point. So it's got to operate based upon the sun. So here's the solar panel. It was about $25. Just got it hooked onto a board with it has suction cups on it because it's made for a car. And I just put a piece of 8x10 plastic that's meant to go in a picture frame on here so the suction cups stick. And this is the solar switch. Go down here. Door's currently open. And I have this little thing here to keep the snow from blowing in. It's not a problem right now because of the spring, but just made a little cute little thing. Hooked it up real quick in my garage. All right, so here's the battery. The solar power comes in and trickle charges this battery here. And they have fuses, one for the solar power, solar panel, came with the solar panel, and then one exiting, feeding all the things. And just have some wires going. I have a light bulb which turns on so I can see in the dark. And here are the guts of everything. So I have two relays, a switch, and a timer. And this is my linear actuator to close the door. I have a board on top of it so the chickens don't poop on it. It's about to turn 4 o'clock, which is no matter what time of the year it is, it's always light out, even in winter. And the timer should turn on and that light should turn green. It's currently daytime. Oop, there it goes. So nothing should happen with the door because it's not dark out yet. All right. So I don't have any chickens in here right now. They're a little too small yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get my timer to shut it off manually right now because I don't need the door opening or closing right now. Auto just means normal, my schedule. I'm just going to turn it off for right now. Okay, that's it closing. Flip the switch. Now it's going to open for me. So I'm sorry about this, but we're going to have to go through some really boring parts here for some of you. Maybe some of you find this fascinating. I don't know. But we're going to have to go through how it works electrically, at least the way I've done it. And then mechanically, it depends on how actually you're going to hook it up, if it goes straight up and down. If your linear actuator has enough travel to make it go straight up and down and still fit a chicken through the door. Or you're going to do it like me. I'm going to have a hinged door and it's going to operate on a radius. And obviously doors work in certain directions. You can't just pull at it from the side because it doesn't open. You got to pull at it from the front, and then that direction changes as you go. So you really got to pay attention so that it doesn't actually just rip the door off rather than rotate the door. So we're going to start that right now. All right, so the way that I'm going to open and close this door is via a linear actuator. And all it really is just a motor that turns some gears which converts it to a linear motion in and out. And it's geared extremely way down, so obviously it's got a little more power because it's such a small motor. It has to be to make power. So it's got a motor in it. It's DC, 12 volt DC. So it can go forwards and backwards based upon the polarity of the motor, of how you wire it up to it. So let's say it's running at one polarity. It's going to go and extend until it hits the extend limit switch. Okay, and then it's going to shut off and it can't go anymore. And then once you reverse the polarity, it can go back in until it hits the retract limit switch, and then it's going to shut off. This is my general overview of my electrical system for my chicken coop door and light. So I have a battery, I have a solar panel which is going to help charge the battery. I have one photo switch which is going to turn on when it gets dark, and we'll talk more about that later. And we have two relays here. We have our linear actuator. We just have a simple LED 12 volt bulb and a light switch. Let's break down each little component here. Let's start with our battery. It's a 12 volt battery, and that's, you can usually find them for cars. I have just a smaller one meant for, little odds and ends like this. It's not powerful enough for a car, but. And then I have a solar panel, which is meant for cars. It's meant for charging a 12 volt car. It normally hangs in your window of your car and helps trickle charge your battery. So I have wires exiting, supplying the power to all the devices, and then connected directly to that wire is the positive for the solar panel, and then the negative, which is a return path for all of our electricity, is also connected to the solar panel. Let's talk about what this schematic that I have actually means. This is not by any means an official drawing by an electrical engineer. I'm not an electrical engineer, but this is how I understand it in my head. And if I draw it out on paper, maybe you want to do the same thing, but this is what helps me out. So when I have this coming out, this is the red lines are in most cases on my diagram here are positive. So I have it starting out and it goes this way, it goes upwards to here, it goes out to here, and it also goes up to here. All of these are all the time, always on power. And same with the negatives. So if I were to follow this out, it would go down to here and up to here, and then over to my bulb, and then over to the relay, and then to our switch here. Those are basically, they're not really on, but they're always connected. This is the diagram for the first relay that I have in my system. This was very cheap. It was like $17 with one drawback. It's cheap, but it can't do absolutely everything for what I want to do. So that's why I have a second relay. But all the other relays were like 50, 60 bucks or up. And what's the point of me making this thing if after I buy all the parts, it's the same price as just buying a chicken door that can go up and down all by itself and I don't have to do any of this work. So that's why I have a cheap one. So it's a really basic design. We have our battery connected to it. We have our motor connected to it. And then we have these three wires coming out of the top of it. And ordinarily what this would be for is like for maybe like a recliner, or maybe you have something that would, I don't know, maybe a wheelchair, you want to go forwards or backwards or something, I don't know. But on this left side here, we have two buttons. You press one button, it causes the linear actuator to go one way. You let go of that button, it's a momentary switch. And then you press the other button and it causes it to go the other way. Here, this is more of my setup here. This is a rocker switch. In the middle position, it's off. One or two would cause it to do one of these two things, forward or reverse with our linear actuator. So this black line here in the middle is sort of our ground. And if I were to touch this to here, it would cause the linear actuator to move one direction. And if I cause it to go this way, it's going to cause the linear actuator to go the other direction. It's a really simple idea. It just changes between these two wires. It's just going to change the polarity of these two wires right here, depending on whether or not the green's touching the black or the blue is touching the black. Let's introduce our photosensitive switch. It is just a simple switch. It can only be on or off. And that's what creates the problem with our relay. As you saw before, it required 2 positions, and this only has 1 position, which makes this relay necessary. But for now, we'll forget everything involving relays, and we're just going to focus on this photosensitive switch here. So I have it connected directly to the battery so that it can power, and something has got to cause the switch to go on or off. It's not going to just work magically by itself. So it has to be powered. So this photo switch has 3 wires connected to it. It's got a positive, a negative, and a load wire. And I'm going to switch over to the diagram of how this thing works. Let's get rid of that. Alrighty. So this is the wiring schematic that I got with this switch. All right. I had to use a multimeter to figure out when it was on, whether it was on when it's dark or if it was on when it's light. I didn't know. I just had to figure it out using a multimeter. So I just had to hook it up to a battery and then covered it with my hands and see what happened to this red wire here. So we have our black wire, which is coming in. It's positive. And then we have our white wire coming out, which is the ground wire. If the switch were on, we would have a continuity between this black wire and this red wire. And then it's going to go out to here, perform work, and then come back and be grounded to this ground wire, just like that. Okay, let's get back to our diagram of our relay. So the ability for this motor to go in or out is going to depend on whether or not this circuit is connected or this circuit is connected. We can't have both at the same time. So with that switch I said before, I could only energize one of these 2, not both. So what I had to do is get another relay. All right, let's get rid of the navigator here. All right, so this is what is an automotive relay. It's an RL45. It might have other names, I don't know. It was less than $10. You could probably buy it even cheaper from Amazon, maybe super cheap, maybe a couple bucks. I have no idea. But what it does is this 30 to 87A is its natural state. If there's no power going through this coil, it's connected from 37 to 87A. All right? And if I were to run power through this from 85 to 86, it creates a magnetic field which causes this flipper thing to get pulled, and it's going to discontinue between 30 and 87A and instead be powered between 30 and 87. And now I'm going to go back to my relay diagram here. All right. So what I did is I made it so that when it gets dark, this circuit right here is going to turn on, and this load wire coming out of that photosensitive switch is going to power on our 85 to 86. It's going to create the current between these 2. All right, and it's going to cause that switch to flip, and we're going to connect 30 to 87 instead of 30 to 87A. So let's say it's light out, all right? This switch is not on, so this current is not happening. So its default state is going to be between 87A and 30. And that's going to cause our linear actuator to go one direction until it hits its stop and then shuts off. And then let's say now it's getting dark. It's going to turn on this circuit from the battery, cause it to run through 85 to 86, flip the switch, go from 30 to 87, and it's going to cause this linear actuator to go the opposite direction, if that makes any sense, until it hits its stop and then shuts off. All right, now let's do the easy part. We've gone through all the hard parts already, so let's just talk about the light. This is really simple. Anybody can figure this out. All you do is have a power, your positive wire, you have a switch, which is basically just an interrupter for the circuit. It's either making contact, creating continuity between these two, or it's not. If the switch is on, it allows power to flow through this wire, energizes our bulb, and it goes back to the battery, just like that. It's connected to our wires that are always on, so we can turn the lights on or off regardless of what's going on with the rest of it. It can run at the same time as anything else here. So it's a really simple setup. You could have multiple bulbs. Obviously, you would probably want them to be in parallel, not in series. And the difference is you would just have to power off each one of these wires would have another branch instead of running from this bulb into another bulb and then having the negative go back, which would be series, but we want parallel. So that's pretty simple. I'm just doing one bulb because that's plenty adequate for me to see at night. Let's go through a few things before we end our little theory session. It's not in the drawing, but I'm going to put a fuse in as close to the battery as possible, just in case one of our positive wires touches our negative wires. Maybe you have a loose wire, maybe a chicken breaks a wire, chews through it, whatever. Just in case a positive touches the ground, it's going to short, and that's going to create a bridge basically between the two terminals of the battery, which is going to unleash a whole lot of power. And that's a problem because our wires are fairly small, and that much current going through these tiny wires could be a fire hazard. We don't want that to happen. So I have a 15 amp fuse. It's sort of average, like a car circuit, like for a small device, maybe a radio or something, could be 10 to 20. Bigger circuits like 40, 50 amps are for much bigger circuits, but they're also much bigger wires going to them, so we don't have to worry about them getting hot. Some of it's going to depend on how thick of wires you're using. Plus, you have to count in how much power is the system going to use. It can't be less than what it has to use, but it also can't be that much more beyond. And then, not in this drawing, I'm going to put a timer switch, a 12-volt timer, programmable, for the times that I know the door won't open or close. Depending on the time of the year, it doesn't matter. Some of these components are going to use power, like this RL45 relay. At nighttime, it's got to power a coil to turn that switch, and that isn't a ton of power. I calculated as using the 7 amp hour battery that I have, and the average amount of power one would use, it would last about 35 hours before the battery went dead on a full charge. But maybe it's cloudy for a week straight, and the solar panel's not really doing much. So I'm just going to have it so it shuts off this positive circuit except for the light and the solar panel, just to shut off the whole system. If the door doesn't need to be open or closed at that second, it can just be turned off. Nothing bad's going to happen. Once the power is returned, then everything will be fine. So let's say between 10 and 4 or 5 in the morning, when I know it's going to be dark and the door should have already closed, nothing should be on. Or in the middle of the day between like 9 and 4, it's going to be off, and nothing needs to be on because the door doesn't really need to do anything at that point. So I'm going to put one in there. And also, you may have noticed an on-off-on switch here that I've added. This is sort of a master switch that allows me to turn or to shut the door or open it. If I'm standing in the coupe, I can flip a switch and shut the door, or I can open the door. And it's just 3 positions. It's on, off, on. It chooses between 2 circuits or being off completely. So on the right side here, let's pretend I have the switch in that position. The battery is going to supply power to it. This is all the time power. And it'll create continuity between this wire and this wire, causing the relay to trip, and it's going to shut the door for me if it's open. In the off position, it's going to shut down our photosensitive switch if it's on and the door is closed, so that the relay is no longer tripped, and it's going to trick the system into thinking it's daytime. And it's going to open the door for me. And then this left position here is if we just want it to operate normally, as if the switch was not here at all. Before, all my previous drawings, it's exactly the same. Most of the time, it's just going to be in this position, just operating on the photo switch. So it just acts as though this switch is not there. Here I have my chicken door. Just an old laundry door that I picked up at the Goodwill for $2.99. Been sitting in my garage for a while, and I'm glad to get it out of there and finally put it to use. But before that, I'm gonna put some stain and make it a little more weathered friendly. It's more likely gonna open to the inside. And why? Because if it's out of the rain, out of the elements, it's gonna hold up better. We have our linear actuator bolted to my door, which now has a couple of coats of lacquer on it. The chickens are probably going to poop on it. I just want to be able to wipe it off with some water and not just have it soaked into the wood. I have my door, which is clamped to this desk, and my linear actuator is attached on the door side. It's not attached over here. And I'm trying to figure out at what relation does this need to be in order for this motor to pull this open without bad things happening. So right now it's currently pretty much in a straight line. The force is parallel to the plane of the door here. And if I were to pull on this, no matter how hard I could pull on this door is not going to open, because that's not how doors work. So if I lift it up a little bit, oh, it's nice and easy. You got to have some torque on it to follow the path of this door. And if it's not, bad things are going to happen. Either you're going to rip this door off the frame or you're going to destroy this linear actuator, and we don't want that to happen. And then also, we got to figure out where to attach this. I drew it up in a simple CAD drawing. You probably don't know how to do that. But the further away it is from the hinges, here's my hinges, the less the door will open. So I just tried to find the right point at which 6 inches of travel causes this thing to open to at least 90 degrees. And I figured that out. It's about 4 inches from the hinges. From my CAD drawing, you can mock it up however you want and try to figure that out yourself. It's going to depend on how much travel your linear actuator has, mostly. If you're doing all this with the straight up and down door, most of this isn't necessary. Where my door is in my chicken coop is right below a window, and I can't make it go up and down. So this is why I am doing it this way. I would have liked to have done it the other way. Plus, linear actuators that can open like a full 12 inches are much more expensive than this cheapo 6-inch model. So we just got to have a ratio at which 6 inches makes this door open all the way. So I have all my components here. This was like $11 for our photosensitive switch. I bought it at an auto parts store, so it was expensive considering what it was. This was like $10. This was like $17 for this. I had the switch laying around. Most of the wires I had laying around from a car project that I'm currently working on. And I had a whole bunch of excess wires. Here's my linear actuator. This was like $35. Battery was like $15. Here. And it's currently not set up. I just have it running off of this power adapter. It's not enough to run this. It's just enough to run all the stuff right here. Okay, so let's go through here with our little situation. Right now I have the lights on in the room and the switch is currently turned off. So it thinks it's daytime right now. Here's our three-way switch, our on-off on switch. It's currently on in the business as normal mode. So it's going off the input this gives it. So currently the power wire, the load wire leaving this photosensitive switch is not on, and it thinks it's daytime. That's why the green light is on. And if I were to cover this up and make it think it's dark, oh, switched reverse polarities on me. What it did is it created power to the relay, induced that coil, flipped the switch, and now it is in that mode. All right, now I'm going to flip the switch here. Now it's going to think it's daytime. Boom. That would have caused the door to open had I had the motor connected to it. And then this one, boom, if the door was open, it just shut. All right, I'm finishing up some assembly and installing it in the Coop. And I got to solder a few connections first. Make sure you don't forget about your heat shrink tubing before you do this. It's burned me a few times. And I know the solder is much too big. That's all I have right now. Anywhere you see a wire joint, I typically solder it, unless it makes sense to put a connector in. I'm going to use this to cover that solder joint.